In the quiet town of Maple Grove, nestled between rolling hills and tall pines, lived 64-year-old Benjamin Harris, a retired postal worker with kind eyes and a voice that once sang lullabies to his children. A decade ago, Benjamin's house echoed with laughter. His wife Charlotte, his son Caleb, and daughter Isabella filled every room with warmth. But life, with its inevitable march, left Benjamin in silence. His wife passed away after a long illness, and his children had since moved across state lines, busy raising families of their own. Now his modest home feels like a museum of memories. Picture frames on the mantel, her favorite teacup still by the window. The days blur into each other, and the nights stretch endlessly. Retirement came earlier than expected, following a departmental reshuffle, and while he had enough savings to get by, nothing could prepare him for the stillness that followed. One evening, as Benjamin sat alone in his recliner, a deep pang of loneliness hit him like a wave. It was in that moment that he realized something had to change. This wasn't the life he had imagined for his later years. And so, his quiet story of rediscovery, resilience, and emotional renewal quietly began. A few weeks after the quiet phone call from his son Caleb, Benjamin Harris sat on the edge of his bed, staring into the muted glow of a nightlight. The silence was suffocating, interrupted only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant sound of wind brushing through the pines outside. He wasn't just alone, he was invisible. The next morning, while trimming his overgrown hedges, Mr. Vernon, his longtime neighbor, stopped by. Vernon, a widower himself, leaned on the fence with a kind but tired expression. "You've got this whole house to yourself now, right, Ben?" he asked gently. Benjamin nodded, not trusting his voice. "Same here," Vernon continued, voice low. "My boys hardly call. The house feels bigger now, emptier." It wasn't the words that hurt, it was the truth in them. For the first time, Benjamin allowed himself to admit it. He was lonely, deeply. He had always assumed strength meant not talking about it. But Vernon's candor opened a door inside his chest. That afternoon, Benjamin wandered through his home, every corner saturated with memories. The sunroom where Charlotte used to sip tea, the hallway lined with faded photos of family trips, the kitchen still carrying the scent of her favorite cinnamon bread. Later that evening, he sat in the living room alone again, absently flipping through television channels. Then his daughter Isabella called. She sounded tired. "Dad, I can only talk for a bit. Work's been crazy and Ryan's got a soccer game in an hour." He smiled through the ache. "No worries, sweetheart. I'm doing just fine." But after the call ended, he stared at his phone for minutes, paralyzed by the weight of everything unsaid. The next day, Benjamin decided to take a walk to the park. It wasn't far, but it felt like a small rebellion against the isolation that had crept in since retirement. As he reached the bench by the pond, Vernon was already there, feeding ducks. "You know," Vernon said, "we ought to plan for this chapter. No one's coming to rescue us. That's just the truth." Benjamin exhaled slowly. "I don't want to just exist, Vernon. I want to live, even now. I just don't know how." Vernon turned, meeting Benjamin's gaze. "Then let's figure it out, together." That single sentence shifted something. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet, like most turning points in life. But it was powerful. That moment marked the beginning of something unexpected. A journey not just to survive old age, but to embrace it. The men began meeting regularly, walking, playing chess, and exchanging ideas about preparing for their futures. from financial planning to creating emergency contact lists. Benjamin soon realized that growing old didn't mean fading into irrelevance. It could be a new beginning, but only if he dared to reclaim it. 3. A few months into his renewed routines, morning walks with Vernon, weekend community center visits, and the occasional trip to the bookstore, Benjamin Harris began to feel something unfamiliar creeping back into his life. Hope. It was fragile, like sunlight through a foggy window, but it was there. Then came Linda Whitmore. She was seated at the community chess table, peering over her glasses at a puzzle book. Benjamin noticed her the way a man recognizes a melody he'd forgotten he loved. She glanced up and offered a warm smile. "Do you play, or are you just here to admire my losing streak?" she joked. Benjamin chuckled, easing into the seat across from her. "I play badly," he said, "but I admire your courage." Over the next few weeks, they became a routine of their own, swapping recipes, attending gardening workshops, and exchanging quiet laughter over lukewarm coffee. Linda had her own story: two grown kids in different states, a house too big for one, and a soul still aching from her husband's passing 5 years prior. Their companionship grew without fanfare. One evening, Benjamin invited her over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken and mashed potatoes, but he'd ironed a shirt and even lit a candle. Linda noticed. "I haven't had dinner by candlelight in years," she whispered, eyes glistening. "Well, I've got a surplus of candles and a shortage of company," he replied, his voice soft with sincerity. That night after she left, Benjamin stood at his kitchen sink, staring at his reflection in the dark window. He wasn't just lonely anymore. He was living again. And for the first time in years, the silence of his house didn't feel so cold. Then, the unexpected happened. A week later, Linda arrived with news that shook the gentle balance they'd built. "My son's getting married next month," she said, eyes flickering. "He wants me to come live with him, help him and his fiancée settle into their new place." Benjamin felt as if the ground beneath him shifted. "Are you going?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. Linda looked down, twisting the ring on her finger. "I haven't decided, but I owe it to him to try. He's my son." Benjamin nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You should go. Family's important. I understand." But he didn't. Not really, because the house had just started feeling like a home again. Days later, Benjamin drove Linda to the bus station. They sat in the car for a while, neither saying much. When the bus arrived, she leaned over and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Benjamin, for reminding me what connection feels like." He managed a smile, but his chest burned. When the bus pulled away, so did the light in his life. Benjamin returned to his now too quiet house. The chair across the dinner table stood empty again. The garden looked dull. The silence once tolerated now screamed. But somewhere beneath the grief, a seed remained, a memory of warmth, and the undeniable proof that even in later years, new chapters could begin. The days after Linda's departure drifted by like mist over a still lake. Benjamin Harris returned to his routines, his early morning stretches, the occasional chat with Mr. Vernon, community center visits. But everything felt muted, like life had dimmed its brightness just a little. Even his favorite chair, once a cozy refuge, now seemed too spacious. He'd wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear Linda's voice echoing down the hall, only to be greeted by the same hollow silence. One chilly evening, Benjamin found himself standing by the window long after sunset, sipping lukewarm tea and staring at the porch light Linda used to turn off before bed. He hadn't had the heart to touch it. The memory of her laughter, her touch, the way she tucked her scarf under her coat before stepping out, it all looped in his mind like an old record. And then it hit him. He was waiting, waiting for her to come back, waiting for someone to fill the void, waiting for the past to return. But it wouldn't, and that was when everything shifted. The next morning, Benjamin walked down to the lake near Maple Grove, bundled in his heavy coat and scarf. He sat on a bench where he and Linda used to talk about their childhoods, their lost loves, their aches and hopes. The breeze stung his cheeks, but it awakened something too: clarity. He had spent months believing that companionship was his salvation, but maybe it wasn't just about having someone beside you. Maybe it was about learning to stand with yourself. For the first time in years, Benjamin turned inward, asking himself questions he'd long avoided. What did he want? What would fulfillment look like now? Not in memory, but in this present season of life. That afternoon, he dug into old boxes in the attic and found a dusty leather journal. It had belonged to Charlotte. Leafing through her graceful handwriting, he came across an entry dated a year before her passing. If Ben ever finds himself alone, I hope he'll still find reasons to smile. He's stronger than he thinks. He always has been. The words hit him like a sunrise through gray clouds. Later that week, Benjamin met with Vernon again over a cup of hot cider at the community center. You ever think about assisted living? Benjamin asked quietly. Vernon blinked. You serious? Benjamin nodded. Not because I'm giving up, because I want to keep moving forward. Be around people. Get care if I need it. I don't want my kids to worry all the time. And honestly, I'm tired of waiting. Vernon looked at him with admiration. That's not weakness, Ben. That's wisdom. That night, Benjamin began researching local senior communities, not out of desperation, but out of a desire to reclaim his life. He wasn't escaping solitude. He was choosing connection on his own terms. A month later, with a suitcase in hand and a quiet resolve in his heart, Benjamin Harris stepped into the lobby of Willow Pines Assisted Living, a senior community nestled just outside of town. The air was clean, the hallways sunlit, and the sound of soft jazz floated from the common area. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like transition. A cheerful staff member named Emily greeted him and offered a short tour. This is the courtyard, great for morning walks. The dining hall is just past those doors, and we have game nights every Friday. Benjamin smiled faintly, absorbing the unfamiliar rhythm of the place. When she opened the door to his new suite, he paused in the doorway. It was modest. A small bed, a chair by the window, and a desk. But it was clean, safe, a blank canvas. That night, lying under new sheets and staring at a new ceiling, Benjamin felt something strange. Relief. Not joy, not yet, but the absence of fear. No longer did he worry about what would happen if he got sick alone. No longer did he dread the endless silence of his empty house. The next morning, he was invited to join a Tai Chi class in the garden. Hesitant at first, Benjamin stepped out, stretching stiff limbs under the soft morning sun. Around him, a dozen other seniors moved slowly, gracefully, some laughing, some focused, all trying. He wasn't the odd one out. He was one of them. As days passed, Benjamin fell into a gentle rhythm. Lunches filled with conversation, late afternoons playing chess with a witty retired teacher named Mr. Caldwell, and quiet evenings reading by the window. One afternoon, while sorting mail in the common area, he received a letter. It was from Linda's son. Inside was a simple note. Thank you for being there for my mother. She spoke of you often. I hope you're doing okay. She would have wanted you to be happy. Benjamin held the note to his chest, his eyes misting over. It was as if Linda had reached across time and space, urging him forward once more. That evening, Benjamin sat with a few residents watching the sunset. A new arrival, a gentle, nervous man named Gerald, sat nearby, unsure of how to fit in. Benjamin turned and offered a warm smile. Care to join us? We were just talking about the worst meals we've ever cooked. Gerald chuckled softly, inching closer. It was a small moment, but for Benjamin, it was everything. In welcoming someone else, he realized how far he had come. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was contributing, belonging. His decision to leave behind the cold comfort of familiarity and step into a new environment had gifted him something priceless, the opportunity to live, not as a shadow of who he once was, but as someone evolving, growing, and still capable of love, laughter, and connection. Months passed, and Benjamin Harris was no longer the quiet new face at Willow Pines. He had become a fixture, a familiar presence in the morning Tai Chi group, a steady hand in the chess club, and a warm voice in the weekly storytelling circle. He no longer counted days by the ache of loneliness, but by the meaningful connections that dotted his calendar. Thursdays were for helping organize the center's monthly newsletter. Saturdays, he volunteered to read books aloud to the visually impaired residents. These were not grand gestures, but they gave his life a renewed rhythm, a purpose. One afternoon, while walking in the courtyard, Benjamin paused to rest on a bench beneath a maple tree, its golden leaves fluttering down like memories. He reflected on how far he'd come. A year ago, he had been frozen, stuck in grief, reluctant to open his heart to life again. And now he laughed. He reached out. He mattered. The transformation hadn't been sudden. It had taken loss, solitude, and gentle nudges from people like Vernon, Linda, and even strangers like Gerald to remind him that resilience was not about resisting change. It was about learning to dance with it. One evening, while sipping tea in the common room, he noticed Margaret, a new resident, sitting alone with a puzzled look on her face. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to figure out the TV remote. Benjamin stood up, walked over, and smiled. "These things haven't gotten any simpler," he said, taking a seat beside her. She laughed. "And I thought I was just losing my touch." He showed her how the buttons worked, then stayed for a while. They ended up talking about books, music, and their shared love for swing dancing. It reminded him of Charlotte, her grace, her laughter, and for a brief moment, the ache returned. But instead of pulling away from the pain, Benjamin embraced it. That ache wasn't a wound anymore. It was a scar, soft and honorable, a reminder of a life well lived and a heart still willing to open. The next morning, he met Margaret again during breakfast. This time, she saved him a seat. And just like that, another friendship began. What Benjamin had come to understand was profound. Love and companionship don't always arrive as lightning strikes. Sometimes they return in subtler forms. A shared laugh, a cup of tea, a walk through the garden. The kind of connection that soothes without asking, heals without demanding. He no longer feared being alone, because he had discovered how to be with himself. And in doing so, he had become someone others looked to for comfort, stability, and gentle guidance. Benjamin Harris had grown, not despite his age, but because of it. He wasn't the same man who sat in his silent house months ago, wondering where his place in the world had gone. He had built a new place, one rooted not in the past but in presence. It was a cool spring afternoon when Benjamin Harris stood at the edge of the Willow Pines courtyard garden, watching the younger grandchild of one of the residents chase butterflies between blooming tulips. Laughter rang out, a sound that had once haunted him in his own empty home, but now brought warmth. He exhaled deeply, not out of weariness, but from a place of contentment that had taken him over 6 decades and 1,000 heartbreaks to find. Benjamin had grown into a quiet mentor among the residents. He wasn't the loudest voice or the most animated storyteller, but people gravitated to him. Maybe it was the way he listened. Maybe it was the way he looked you in the eyes and made you feel seen. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because he carried a gentle wisdom that only comes from loss transformed into compassion. One sunny morning, his son Caleb visited, bringing along his 2 children. Benjamin sat with his grandson on the porch swing, answering curious questions about old radios, black and white TVs, and what it was like before the internet. Then in a quiet moment, Caleb turned to him. "Dad, you seem different, happier, lighter." Benjamin smiled. "I suppose I stopped fighting life and started dancing with it. It took me a while to realize that happiness at this age doesn't always come from big changes. Sometimes it's the little consistencies, the morning sun, a warm conversation, the trust of a friend." Caleb nodded slowly, eyes softening. "I used to worry about you. After Mom, and then when Linda passed, I thought you'd never be the same." Benjamin looked out at the garden, a hint of sadness in his smile. "I'm not the same, but I'm not broken. I've just changed shape." That evening, back in his room, Benjamin sat at his desk and opened a new journal. On the first page, he wrote, "Life didn't end when I lost the people I loved. It paused, reshaped, then whispered, 'Live again, differently.' So I did." The next day, he joined a few residents for an arts workshop. The instructor handed them clay and asked, "Mold something that represents how you see yourself today." Benjamin thought for a moment, then slowly shaped a hollow tree trunk, weathered but sturdy, with space for new life inside. He placed it on the table with quiet pride. The seasons continued to turn, and Benjamin became the kind of person Linda would have smiled at from across a room, the kind of father Charlotte would have proudly watched, the kind of friend others could lean on. No, life hadn't turned out as he once imagined, but it had offered something just as valuable, the chance to begin again, with dignity, intention, and grace. And in those quiet mornings, when he'd sip tea by the window and the birds began to sing, Benjamin Harris knew he had truly learned to live well. In the twilight years of life, we are often taught to expect loss of people, of health, of relevance. But what we aren't told enough is that growth doesn't stop with age. Benjamin Harris's journey reveals that healing and renewal are still possible, even after profound loneliness or heartbreak. The greatest lesson he learned wasn't about avoiding solitude, it was about choosing what to do with it. Aging gracefully isn't about resisting change, it's about embracing the new rhythms life offers. Whether it's starting fresh friendships, letting go of guilt, or learning to be okay with memories that ache, it all adds up to a deeper kind of wisdom. Love in your later years may not look like youthful passion, but it can be richer, steady, nourishing, and real. And most importantly, the ability to live well, to be at peace with who you are and what you survived, is perhaps the most profound gift of all. If you're entering your senior years and feeling the weight of isolation, consider taking small steps like Benjamin. Start with your financial health. Secure the basics. Then reach out, visit a senior center, join a walking group, or even attend a book club. If companionship feels too distant, focus on cultivating self-connection first. Don't be afraid to explore senior living communities, not as a last resort, but as a new beginning. These environments can offer safety, friendship, and peace of mind. And remember, it's never too late to form meaningful bonds. Most importantly, let go of the belief that your story is over. You're still the author, and there are blank pages ahead. Fill them with presence, laughter, and small acts of courage. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share with your friends. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And if today's story touched your heart, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, stay well, and see you in the next story.